Hey everybody, welcome to the Laracasts Snippet. It has been a while, but not due to a lack of topics or ideas. Actually, I see a bunch of them here as I review my list. No, it's just due to everything else that's going on, which usually ends up being the case for us, right? I'm looking over right now in my to-do app. I have a bunch of podcast ideas. So what happens is I'll be around town, or it'll be late at night in bed, and I'll think about something, and I'll say to myself, I should write that down because that would be a good thing to talk about on the podcast. And what's always funny, and I'm noticing that right now, is I will write 3 words that I think will jog my memory when I come back to it. But often they are so vague that I have no clue what the good idea actually was. So for example, right here I have podcast. I write them literally as to-do items in my to-do list. Podcast, fumble.
What?
No idea what that represents. But I do have a description here. Talk about feeling bad about stumbling through new features, realizing most people do the same, like a flashlight. In the dark, you don't know where you're going until you make a map, and that is okay. All right. Well, it seemed like a good idea at the time, and maybe there's something there. Here's another idea. Podcast, boring option. Yeah, actually, I know what this one is, and I agree with it. When in doubt, the boring choice is usually the right one. Yeah, when you're trying to figure out what path to go, what item to buy, what feature to work on. Sometimes the flashy one, the fancy one, the one that will get the most responses, the shiniest one is the wrong choice. Sometimes you want to pick the boring option. Sometimes the boring option is the right option. And I agree with that. It works for everything too. It works for your career, for programming, for the purchases you make. Should you buy the fancy, flashy car, or should you buy the Honda that's going to go 300,000 miles? Well, unless money is no object to you, you should buy a Honda most of the time. Even though it's the boring option, sometimes that's the way to go, right? What else do we have here? Podcast, let's make that not a thing. So, what is that reference? Let's make that not a thing. I think that was, my thinking there was finding things in your code base. And the thing is like something annoying, something you always have to deal with, something that isn't clear, something that you every time have to return to it to figure out how it works. Let's make that not a thing would be make whatever changes you need to in order for this thing that you're dealing with to not be a thing. That's kind of cool. But no, the one I'm going to cover today is podcast, big fish, small ponds. Big fish in small pond or small fish in big pond, which is better? Best is to travel between ponds. Clearly, I wrote this at 10 o'clock at night because I was thinking about ponds, okay? No, I know exactly what this is. All right. You often notice in the programming world, and you see this in social media or blog posts, where people just exude this sense of being kind of burnt out, worn out. And I was thinking about how sometimes it's because of overwork, right? It's because we've been cramming. I've been working 60-hour weeks, and now every time I open my editor, I just have no enthusiasm. I am burnt out. And that's one, and that's probably the majority of times. But I think there's also an element of burnout from just the constant exposure to brilliance. And we get that because of social media, don't we? Anytime you open up that app, especially if you're in kind of a programming community, every single day you're exposed to people significantly smarter than you. Significantly more creative, people who have higher IQs than you, higher intellect, higher every single thing. And it's such a double-edged sword, right? From one point of view, it's like, well, you benefit from that. You are exposed to these people who offer their knowledge for free. And isn't that an amazing thing? Because no matter what, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? You will become smarter as a result of knowing these people. But then at the same time, it's hard because the internet has revealed to all of us that we are podcast, small fishes in big ponds, right? I just don't know if that's a good thing. When I was a kid, before the internet, back in the 1980s, of course, internet wasn't a thing, really more like the 90s. It's funny, I always think of the 80s as like my childhood. It really wasn't. The 90s was my childhood. In 1990, I was 5 years old, right? Or maybe 4.5. So yeah, really it's the 90s, but because I have older siblings, I have a fondness for the 80s in a way that I don't have for the 90s, which is interesting. Anyways, it doesn't matter. But yeah, at that point, long before the internet, you had the ability to be a big fish in a small pond. You could figure out what your thing was in school, and you could become the best at it, right? So for me, as many know, like I was really into, you can't see this, but I got a guitar there, guitar there, guitar there, guitar there. I like guitars. And I was really into it as a kid. And then throughout my 20s, I took like a 10-year break. Actually, interestingly, I burnt out on that. And then I've recently come back to it in the last few years. But yeah, that was sort of my thing. And what was great about it is there wasn't that much competition in my school. So I was able to like identify myself as the guitar guy. And I could be a big fish in a small pond. I was the best guitar player in my school. But of course, I wasn't the best guitar player everywhere, but I didn't know that. You don't know what you don't know, right? So in my mind, if I was the best in my school, I was probably in the top 25 in the country, right? I was in the top tier. In my mind at 12 years old, and of course in reality, nothing could have been further from the truth, right? I probably wasn't in the top 50,000. But that's sort of what I'm referring to. It's like, it's nice to have these small ponds that can build up your confidence, right? It's a way for you to figure out who you are. You can identify yourself. You can distinguish yourself from everyone else. And most kids do this, right? They figure out one little area that is their thing, and then they go deep into it. Right now, my son is like into karate, and that's his thing. His discipline it's bizarre, and I think he's going to burn out on it. But right now, he's really into it, and he'll run around the playground like he's doing laps, like he's Karate Kid or something, and I love it. For my daughter, she's obsessed with ballet. For me, when I was young, I was obsessed with guitar, and it is such a confidence booster. I would recommend it to anyone. But again, the problem is right now, that small pond no longer exists at all because you have the internet and because of social media. And this is actually another reason why I think very much so we should prevent our kids from accessing social media as long as humanly possible for this very reason, or at least this being one of the many reasons why we should do that, in my opinion. But yeah, it's just like as soon as they get on YouTube, as soon as they are on social media, they will instantly be exposed to thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people their age who are so much better than them in every possible way. And it's a confidence killer at that point. And I don't know how we deal with that because, again, it always ends up being a double-edged sword. If I were getting into guitar now as a 12-year-old, in some ways, I could go on YouTube and social media and I would see people so much better than me, but also they would make me better as a result, right? I would have access to so many things that I didn't have access to back in the 90s. Back in the 90s, if you wanted to learn how to play a guitar solo you liked, you had to go to Guitar Center, you had to purchase a $38.99 tablature book, and then you'd bring it home and you would do your best to parse that tablature into the solo. And back then, solos were so fast, sometimes it was very, very difficult to figure out how the tablature lined up with the solo, right? But now it's like you have, well, first, now you can get that tablature or sheet music for free in 100 different ways. You have ways to slow it down. You have ways to see teachers on YouTube show you how to play it for free. You can slow down the teacher's hands 25% to see precisely what they're doing. It's really an amazing thing. And again, rising tide raises all boats. But again, you will never, ever, ever be the big fish. Maybe one person is, and that one person is special. And that's great for them, but for the rest of us, it's just not the case. We will never even be in the running for big fish. Yeah, think about it like this. I run a business about Laravel, basically, teaching people how to build applications with Laravel. And trust me, it's not lost on me that I am surrounded by people every time I read a blog post or go on Twitter or X. I am surrounded by people whose intellect is higher than mine, whose creativity is greater than mine, whose taste level is better than mine, whose IQ is bigger than mine, every single day. And it's not a few people, it is most of them are better than me, right? And my whole job is to teach people how to do this. So nobody is excluded from this. Or again, that one person is excluded from this in every field. And there's like one or two people who are just clearly at the top of the pack. And everyone else, we're not even close. And I do wonder what that does for confidence levels and how that contributes to burnout. Again, not burnout from hard work, but burnout from just, I will never be good enough. I am constantly surrounded by brilliance and creativity, and I'm not doing that. And what does that do for our psyche? And I don't have an answer for you. Sometimes I like to come up with some kind of conclusion, some kind of happy ending, and I just don't know what it is. Here in my task list where I thought up the idea, best is to travel between ponds. You need both. Yeah, so my thinking there was it would be cool if we had ways to be the big fish in the small pond for a little while, and then also expose yourself to being the small fish in the huge pond, right? You need both. You need big fish and small pond to build up your confidence, and then if you stay there, you will never expand, as we all know. So you need to be thrust into that huge ocean to realize how inferior you actually are. But you can't just have one or the other. I don't think that's good for us. You need to experience both. But I don't know how to do that anymore, other than doing your best to shield your kids from, and I don't even know if you should do that, actually. I was going to say shield your kids from YouTube and things like that. But then again, they benefit so greatly from it. And that is the hardest thing with the internet and social media in general, especially for young people. It's like there are so many benefits, but also the downsides are so extreme. And I guess we're all figuring out how to deal with that right now as parents. All right, that's it for me. My name is Jeffrey Way. This is the Laracasts Snippet. I will see you next time. Bye.